Never seen it coming. Never ever seen it coming.
Bare minimum, you need 20 goals as a Celtic striker to be considered not a flop.
He's had more goal celebrations than he's had goals.
Brendan Rodgers doesn't want him.
Reo Hatate. I can't remember the rest of the words to that song, but the fact of the matter is,
the Celtic get excited, but you barely play.
Yes,
I think is the
and we match you bitter in the January. Amelia is what we had, so we had bitterly disappointing for Reo Hatate.
Yeah, I think I'd keep him in there. Understand Reo Hatate is a good player, but for his standards, he has been bitterly disappointing, and even him coming back into the team did coincide with Celtic improving their results, but his performances in the big games within that, mainly the big games against Rangers, he was an absolute liability. So for him and for the season, bitterly disappointing. But I think if he stays next season, I expect him to be up there in the top 2.
Yeah, it hasn't happened for him this season, really, has it? Injury hit, and I think it is important, and you've already acknowledged it, to point to the fact that when he came back into the team, Celtic looked much better. They just did. The midfield looked a lot more dynamic and a lot more creative when he came back into the team. But you're right to point to those derbies as well, about how he just, I mean, he was a passenger bordering on liability, as you said, and these are the games we want him to step up, and he is capable of being the best player on the pitch in these games, and at times he was, one of the worst. So it's been a weird season for him. It seems very harsh to say that he's bitterly disappointing, but I think on this occasion we've spent a few times tonight talking about taking that literal tag off.
Yeah.
But this one, it is literal. It has been bitterly disappointing for him, and in many ways due to injuries, loss of form, and a little bit of sort of erratic play towards the end of the season when the big games started arriving. It's bitterly disappointing, but there's as you say, every chance he could be player of the year next year.
Well,
he's that good.
I think we've seen this season why Reo Hatate is probably, famous last words here, going to spend more time at Celtic than he probably thought. Because for me, he's just at an age and stage and quality of a player that I just don't see breaking into the big leagues just now. Certainly not a top team in a big league. I just don't see Reo Hatate going to even your Brightons and then moving on from that point. For me, over the course of Reo Hatate's Celtic, and in particular in this season, what I've seen as a player, we use that phrase, that's why he's at Celtic. Celtic always get that sort of second or third level European player. And that's probably what I'm seeing from Reo Hatate, because I don't think any top team in the top league could afford to have a player who blows as hot and cold as Reo Hatate does. And I think you're right. I think this season's been bitterly disappointing for Reo. I think his overall contribution is third in the class. So
what a goal that was against St Mirren, right enough. That took it in and just bent it in with the outside of the foot. That was brilliant, but it's not enough.
Have we had anyone move more than one place yet?
Oh, I wonder. No, probably not, no.
Because we've got James Forrest up next, who in January was Terminado, but my God, that slide whistle needs to be brought back out for this man, Stephen.
That slide whistle, only dogs are going to be able to hear that slide whistle, as high that's going to be. James Forrest, I mean...
Is there a chance?
Yeah, to have gone from Terminado in January because it looked like he was never going to play again, really, at that point, because we'd signed a load of wingers. They'd varying degrees of form. So Palma was in and looking all right at that point. Dyson had some injury problems, but we could have lost James Forrest in January and no one would have bothered. It would have been at the end of the season, once all the title race stuff was over and done with, who would have looked back and thought, what a player James Forrest was in his day. But if we'd lost him in January, I don't think anyone would have really paused because things were so tense. So to have gone from that position to what he ended up contributing towards the end of the season was a really quite remarkable, an incredibly remarkable turnaround. And I don't think he's, over the season, I don't think he's one of the top 2 or 3 or 4 even really contributors to it. But for that run-in, he was a huge deciding factor.
He was astonishingly brilliant.
Yeah.
If you're using the words literally, he was astonishingly brilliant.
So people will say, oh, you're getting carried away here with this James Forrest stuff, and just because he kept... But I'm a bit like you, Millie. We don't win the league without James Forrest performing the way he did when he came in. And I've said it before, and I think one of the most astonishing things about James Forrest is, and I just don't think you can underplay this, is he was so out of the picture for so long.
Not even in squads.
Not even in squads. He was second or third choice under even Ange a couple of years ago, but he's still in the club. And it's like he managed to keep himself fit and focused. And we know what Brendan Rodgers wants at training. We see that with players that come in and get papped out right away. If you're not performing at the level to go, the effort James Forrest must have put into Celtic this season, and he said it himself in one of the post-match press conferences we did or after the cup final celebrations, like, sometimes I'm at Lennoxtown training with 4 or 5 guys who are out the picture on match days, but he was fit and able and taking on what the manager said, even though he knew he wasn't going to play. And then one day he goes, by the way, we need you to step in. Bang, off he goes, and he performs brilliantly. And I honestly don't think that should be underrated, because there's players that were closer to the first team than James Forrest who couldn't perform the way he did, like Kuhn, like we were talking about. Like so I think there's no question for me. James Forrest, we don't win the league without him. Top of the class.
I can understand why that, but if we're again going for the contribution for the season, I'm going to put him in the second tier. A right good teammate, because that's what he became. Maybe.
So who contributed in the first half of the season and the second half of the season? Because we need to be careful with this, because there's not one player we've marked as, maybe except Matt O'Reilly, there's not who contributed over both halves of the season. Because if you're going to point to everyone and go, well, he didn't contribute in the first half of the season, so I need to mark him down for his contribution in the second half of the season. My argument as opposed to that would be that the whole season is effectively the second half of the season, because almost everyone got no pass marks for the first half.
He's more the last, is it even third of the season? What are we talking here?
Probably a month in it.
Eight games.
Did we win the league without James Forrest's contribution?
No, but I can't put him up there in that top bracket, because there's guys in there that will play every week and done what we asked of them. So now I would put him in the second bracket. He was astonishingly brilliant, but I can't put him in that bracket. The way he came back, never seen it coming, never ever seen it coming. Even in the last sort of games against Rangers, they were the best games he's had against Rangers in his whole career for me. So came in, did not even exactly what you want him to do, more than you could ever ask of him at this stage of his career. We were going, what is Brendan Rodgers talking about? He's the best winger at the club. Turns out he is, but he just can't do it at that level for that sustained amount of time. So right good teammate for me, and well played, Jamesy.
Yeah, rubbish in the cup final though. So that's what it boils down to. No, I can't develop on anything that's been said so far. I think I'll now have an enviable deciding vote here. I think I could make the case for astonishingly brilliant, but I think it is right good teammate. I think he's just below the likes of who's made it into there so far, Cameron Carter-Vickers and Callum McGregor.
That's it, yeah.
He's just below those guys. And I know that everything we've just said about Cameron Carter-Vickers or about James Forrest could be applied to Cameron Carter-Vickers.
That's my point, isn't it?
Your point about the kind of first half of the season there. But
Callum McGregor we marked him bitterly disappointing the first half of the season. We've just turned around and said he was astonishingly brilliant this season.
I know.
For the second half of the season.
Yeah, it doesn't work, does it?
No.
Should we start again? So I think I'm in the unenviable position of having the casting, the deciding vote in this one. I agree with every point that's been made here. It's one of those weird ones where he doesn't quite fit naturally into any one category. He's a bit of both of the two. But to have gone from Terminado, just outright, just get rid of him in January, to anything approaching like one of the top 2 tiers is some turnaround. That's greatest of all time in one of these tier builders. It's unprecedented stuff to have risen that much. So I don't think, I would have him just below, I think, who's in the top tier. So that's Cameron Carter-Vickers and Callum McGregor so far. Just below them, it's almost like he's just above the rest of the guys who are in the right good teammate tier as well. So he's like a right good teammate plus an astonishingly brilliant
a B plus if such a thing existed, but we force ourselves into these little pens that we're not allowed to leave. I think this next one's going to be quite a short conversation, because Matt O'Reilly's up next. Astonishingly brilliant, rewarded in January, and I think there's no denying that he's the best player in Celtic. Not the best player in the league though, apparently, which I'm still bitter about. He's the guy's brilliant. I remember saying in the Discord just before January, I was like, this guy, I just think Matt O'Reilly's brilliant. I think he's like James Maddison level player. His next move is going to be right to one of the top teams in the top leagues. and they laughed at me. Well, needless to say, you're not laughing now, because I don't think there's any doubt that Matt O'Reilly's next move is going to be a top 5 team in a top 5 league.
Yeah, and rightly so, he deserves it.
After this season, rather.
He's been incredible. The consistency, even though he had a dip, Neil Lennon quotations, I still think he was fine within that. He just wasn't maybe getting the goals. So I think he's one of the best seasons that I've seen from a Celtic player that's not Henrik Larsson. I think he's been incredible. Nearly 20 goals and 20 assists each from a central midfielder player, not even that number 10 player. Yeah. Unbelievable. Just came in and has been a revelation at Celtic. Absolutely everything you could ask of a player. Came in, gets it, improves, is getting the complete most out of his own talent and ability and more. And one of the guys that when he does go, I don't think MD's going to go and have anything bad to say about him, and that is very, very rare. So, look, even with him, just create a new tier for him. He's been that good. Astonishingly brilliant.
He's a non-mover. He remains firmly in astonishingly brilliant, because we've spoken quite a lot about the players who stepped up towards the end of the season. None more so than Matt O'Reilly. The goal scoring form he went on towards the end of the season there was like striker level stuff. I mean, what did he get? Like 5 goals in his
same
last
amount of
6
goals
games?
as Kyogo.
Yeah, it did. So, a remarkable season from the guy. I thought you were going to say it's one of the best performances you've seen from a midfielder, but one of the best performances from a player in the last 20 years or something like that. That sounds.
Is he our top goal scorer this year?
Is it joint maybe with Kyogo? I think
maybe joint or just one under.
Yeah.
But look, Celtic, as we keep saying, this team's no great. If you take Matt O'Reilly like that, Celtic don't win the league, they don't win the cup. They comfortably finish far behind Rangers. If it wasn't for him, Celtic would be nowhere near this title. And look, Cameron Carter-Vickers is so important because of what he brings. Matt O'Reilly has pretty much single-handedly dragged Celtic across this season, because he's been the only one that's been available the whole time. Never missed a game for Celtic through injury, always been there. There's only 2 games he's not contributed in his whole Celtic career. He's been on the bench for them, and they were sort of meaningless games where Celtic won them fairly comfortably. Incredible, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it sounds like hyperbolic nonsense to start limping him in with Henrik Larsson and all that, but what you mean is that it's one of the best since then, one of the best seasons. I can't disagree with that. I think it's been fantastic, really. And that's why we were so worried about it in January. Remember when he was being linked with the sort of European giants? Cannot entertain any thoughts of selling that guy. It doesn't matter what the bidders say. There's, we'll be loaded. We'll get 25, 30 million for him. We'll be laughing at Skint Sevco. We'll be laughing at them from second place. If we
was that important. You know, that's a very common argument you hear, right? And we'll get into that. But the Matt O'Reilly thing was so serious that not one single person was like, take the money. No everyone was like, 50 million, don't care. No. We simply cannot afford to sell this guy. I'm going to miss Matt O'Reilly gliding about the Celtic Park pitch, because I think it's pretty obvious this summer a move is probably in the offing for the guy, but he's been absolutely brilliant, astonishingly brilliant, top of the class, top of the class.
A credit to the club as well overall. So yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Stephen Welsh is up next. January, he was disappointing for me. Terminado, the guy's made a glass. Stephen, he gets injured every time he plays, and he's not a very good footballer.
He was terrible when he came on, and that St Mirren at the end of the season as well. He gave away a comical penalty from his own mistake and all that, and he's another one of these guys. It's hard to kind of categorise because we're not going to get rid of him. He's on a long-term contract. He is one of these guys who's always...
If you want.
There's weird links, isn't there? He's always linked with like Italian teams and all that, but he's a guy who, at his stage of his career, isn't going to get any better. So I'd be tempted to just stick him in Terminado. Realistically, they're probably not going to get rid of him because going to need... he's going to be one of those 4 or 5 centre-halves we've got for next season. But given the choice, I would like a better player in that position, so it's Terminado for me.
It's not about really keeping him or getting rid of him, Melly. It's about how he done this season. And I mean, it is overall. Look, nothing against him. Not again. It's the bit like the Ralston thing. I just think he's just not good enough to be a Celtic centre half. Why do I think that? Because I've been watching Celtic for long enough now that I've seen plenty of better centre halves, and I've seen better centre halves at Celtic who weren't even particularly good Celtic centre halves. For example, Stephen McManus is not a legendary Celtic centre-half in terms of how good he's been, but he was miles better than Stephen Welsh.
Yeah, and I think with Welsh, it's this season, this was the chance, mate. If you could stay fit, there was a position for you right there where you could have went, I'm taking that. That's Liam Scales. Nawrocki's not doing it. Lagerbielke's never going to do it. I can get ahead of Liam Scales, and he couldn't even do that. And it's not his own fault. It's not as if he's getting the same injury over and over. There are like that shoulder one he got that he had to go off and all. It's never going to happen for him where he's a mainstay at Celtic. For this, he's not leaving, but I think Terminado for his contribution, because even when he did get the chance, he didn't look that great.
It's vaguely comical the way that Stephen Welsh enters a football pitch and then leaves it with some random injury. I know. You feel you can't help but feel for the guy. He can't catch a break, but he's not catching a break here either. The bottom of the class, Terminado. Next up, Stephen Kyogo.
Oh, right, okay.
Right good teammate in January.
So that, I'm assuming in January we would have graded him based on the fact that he looked a little bit lost in the first part of the season, where we were talking about how we've not really found that way of making him as effective as he's been in previous seasons. We've not really found him with enough passes. We've lost that connection between the midfield and the wide players and Kyogo that worked so well the previous seasons, where, I mean, look, he scored, 34 goals or something the previous season. That was unlikely to happen again. Not many players go out and just rattle in 30 odd goals per season consistently. So I think we were maybe a little bit disappointed, but not being like overly concerned about it in January. His season has continued in a way that has been good. It has been reasonably effective. He still ended the season with 19 goals, I think. But I remember Hugh Keevans back in the day said that it was bare minimum. You need 20 goals as a Celtic striker to be considered not a flop. So he hasn't quite lived up to Hugh's very high standards that he demands of Celtic strikers, but he's still been reasonably effective, just not for him, just not for his previous standards. He is probably a right good teammate, because I think back to those goals against Rangers that were scored this season, that amazing goal that was goal of the season by a long way.
Brilliant.
In Butland with his left foot. The one at Ibrox on the kind of bounce and just rattled it into the bottom corner. So these are all big goals. A couple of goals in the Champions League as well, of course, lest we forget, because
assisted by Matt O'Reilly, no less.
Yep, 2 identical goals, wasn't it, against Lazio and Atletico Madrid. So there have been goals there. Obviously, a lot of recency bias will come into a thing like this when we've just won the league. We're on a high that all that stuff seems like ages ago. All that stuff seems like a previous season. So he has come up with big moments. I think it would be very harsh to put him in anything less than right good teammate, but I do not think he has been astonishingly brilliant.
No, not astonishingly brilliant. Right good teammate, and I think kind of got better when Adam Idah came in, because it meant not he had competition, but there was somebody there that take the pressure off him. Where
everyone describes Adam Idah as a good reference. A lot of people have been using that word, a good reference for the team.
Maybe say foil. I wonder where they got that from.
Because there was points where Idah was coming in.
Anyway,
nothing else to say on that. There's points where Idah was coming in. It just looked like it's the first half of the season. The weight of the world was on Kyogo. He was getting the ball and taking shots because he wasn't involved in the game. Came up with big goals, and Adam Idah coming in, take the pressure off him, contributed a lot towards the end of the season, but not to his high standards. So right good teammate for me.
Right good teammate, easy. Adam Idah. Now, my boy Adam, loved him.
So a no entry for January, of course, because that's when he arrived.
No entry for January, new player. Tough one. Yeah, it is a tough one, because he dug us out of some massive holes. He won us the Scottish Cup.
Well, he's another one you could easily say we don't win this league without him.
Yeah.
If we continue, we just owe in the squad then.
It's funny you should mention that, because I was thinking to myself, that applies for Kyogo. He has contributed massively this season with lots and lots and lots of goals, but we're sitting here going, but he's not as good as he has been, so therefore his overall contribution this season is marked down. But I think for Idah, you're right, it's just I firmly believe that Motherwell late result at Motherwell, which he was absolutely crucial for, that turned our season around. That was the corner.
It was in the bin at that point. Genuinely, at half time during that game, I think a lot of people were just like, we've chucked this away, we've got nothing about us.
And I remember coming on the Monday podcast and going, that's the corner turned. And it's all because Adam Idah. And then look, You score the winning goal against Rangers in the Scottish Cup final to secure the double. That gets you top of the class for me.
No, top of the class for me because, like Stephen said, you don't win the league without him and you don't win the cup without him. And other Kyogo's a wee bit different because we were basing him on the whole season. All we can judge Idah on is from when he came in, which was the last day in January. So February to May, could he have done any more for me? No. And he came on, changed games. Late goals, 5 goals after the 87th minute for Celtic, which all either won the game or got Celtic back into the game. Goals away to Motherwell, goals away to Hibs, crucial games. Scored against Rangers twice. What more do you want?
Are you listening, Nicholas Gerrit Kuhn? That's how you come to Celtic in January.
Get it up, you.
So we're all in agreement.
No, Idah's been brilliant. I mean, I think he's a fairly easy, astonishingly brilliant, because I know that we have largely written off a lot of the first part of the season for some of these players, but then a lot of Kyogo's biggest contributions were the first part of the season, so it's a kind of complicated system we've got here, but we're grading players across sometimes the whole season, sometimes half of the season. Idah only got half of the season, so that was his job. It was his objective was to get Celtic to back up Kyogo at times, to contribute when he could. But he was a guy who was brought in to add the quality that we were missing from January to May. And that's exactly what he did. So it's a big gold star for him being brought in at that time and what he contributed. So it's astonishingly brilliant. I just don't think we do it without him. I think the options aside from him, I just don't think we've got enough about us to get it done. Massive goals, massive contributions, really got it as well. Whatever that means, he definitely did. So he's astonishingly brilliant because a key deciding factor in his winning 2 trophies, even though he was only here for 15 or 16 weeks. 2,
maybe 3, really quick fire. I doubt we're going to get any disagreement here. First one up, David Turnbull was Terminado in January, and I think it's fair to say Terminado now.
Yep, Celtic get better without him. Terminado.
There you go. And Leo Labada, not much to discuss there. He was bitterly disappointing in January, so he's gone. That's Terminado. The third one, Joe Hart, bitterly disappointing, but I suspect that's gone up a little bit. Martin Melly.
Oh, tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. I think this was sort of off the back of European games where he looked a bit dodgy, and Celtic went through that sort of December bit where we were getting beat off Hearts, the Kingsley free kick as well. People were looking at him, and Celtic seemed to be conceding a lot from corners because he wasn't coming. I said that in January, if we don't replace him, I think we could end up costing us towards the end of the season. Completely wrong. He's been utterly brilliant, astonishingly brilliant, some might say, for the guy. I don't think if it wasn't for Joe Hart saying he was retiring, it galvanised Celtic. So I'm going to make a play and say astonishingly brilliant, because not even just the leadership and the stuff we don't see, what we've seen on the pitch was big saves at big moments for Celtic that if they go in, that crushes Celtic at that time. So I'm going to say he's right up there.
Another bumblebee that's been in my bonnet, Stephen, has been the praise that has been lavished upon Jack Butland. From the minute he put on a Rangers shirt, people just assumed he was a brilliant keeper. And every time someone scores against them, the phrase is always unusual there for Butland, who's been excellent this season. Every time Rangers concede a goal, whereas Joe Hart has not had any of the praise that Jack Butland has had, but for me has been every bit as good, and if not better, in that second half of the season, but just completely almost ignored by the Scottish press up until the last 3 weeks. Then all of a sudden all their attention turned to him, and I think he's been a very good signing for Celtic, and I think he's been astonishingly brilliant for me. His contribution overall, he pulled out some great saves for us towards the second half of the season. So top of the class in there.
Yeah, was that one in particular against Hearts? That one that was heading into the top corner. Yeah, I mean, just a massive figure. Just a massive figure in this Celtic team and Celtic's recent history. I said recently about Joe Hart that in our last proper podcast of the season after the cup final, I'd said that it appeared to me like once Joe Hart had announced his retirement, as you said, Millie, it felt like Celtic weren't going to be denied from that point on. It seemed to just spur everyone on. It seemed to galvanise, as you said, the team towards getting the job done, not only for the fans, for the club, for their own sake, but for Joe Hart. It just added that little bit of extra importance onto it. Not the main thing, of course. That's not why players are motivated to win games and win trophies. But if there's just that extra sprinkling of whatever magic it is football brings to players to motivate them to do things, then that might have been the important deciding factor. I could only speculate on that. I'm not party to what goes on behind closed doors in the dressing rooms, but from what everything that people said after they won the league and won the cup final about how important it was to send Joe Hart out as the winner he deserved to be, then I think it's a fairly easy conclusion to reach that was a big factor in getting the job done. So that's what he brought to the table in the build up to these things. But how did he perform? And it was brilliantly, to be honest. With the last few weeks of the season, he was absolutely excellent. He wouldn't have liked to have conceded a couple of goals in his last ever league game to St Mirren, but that's part of the drama of it. So a clean sheet in his final ever game in football against the big rivals in a massive game, to go out as a cup final winner and the double winner. Brilliant for him, but he was brilliant for us as well. Yeah. So it's astonishingly brilliant.
Now, lads, we've been going for quite some time now.
Yep, sure have.
We're in the last 5. Right, here we go.
Right.
The last 5.
The lightning round.
We always say we'll try and keep it to an hour, but Celtic are making this impossible with the amount of players
we can't say exactly how long it's taken because we don't know how it's going to come together in an edit. But we do know for sure it's been over an hour. Right, here we go.
Brendan Rodgers is often most managers talk about wanting to have a trim, sleek, sort of streamlined squad. And I think he's motivated by the fact that these just go on too long.
Yes.
So, that's his main motivation for this.
Suspect this may be a 2-parter, but who knows? Right, Daniel Kelly.
Oh, right, good.
Easy, you. Just easy.
Didn't play enough.
Nah, didn't play enough.
No sign that new deal either.
Nah.
Get him out, rat.
Nah.
No, but when he did play, he looked good, so bitterly disappointing. Nah, you need to go Terminado, don't you? But
yeah, because he wouldn't. He's Daniel Kelly, Stephen, has done enough just to get graded.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
he played some football. Scored that goal against Dundee, didn't he? It was a lovely finish.
Lovely
He looked good. He looked like a good player. So I think it'd be very, very harsh to put him in Terminado because of the implications of that. I know that it's the 4th tier of players throughout the season, but we can't even contemplate putting him in ahead of bitterly disappointing. But I can't really put him ahead of that. So he's not played enough football to get any higher than bitterly disappointing. But it's just
for me, it's
played a handful of games as a
teenager. For me, it's fourth tier with a star, with an asterisk beside it.
Yeah.
Melly.
Not his own fault. Terminado, not his own fault.
Okay, 4th. We're looking for you to improve on that next year, Daniel. That's the point.
At Tottenham.
Yeah. Next point.
Oh, Terminado.
Wow, right good teammate in January. Terminado now.
Yeah, I think he had the goal against St Mirren, but I think we were the sort of victims of this is what we've got. Maybe he's decent, maybe he'll kick on, and then Adam Idah comes on and go,
I'll take it from here, kid.
Aye, this is what we've got. Brendan Rodgers, barely seen fit to have him in any squads towards the end of the season. Just never seems like he's going to be a Brendan Rodgers player. When you see towards the end of last season, started the game at Ibrox and missed that chance, which was a golden opportunity, and then you see Adam Idah bagging 2 goals against Rangers and contributing big goals, whereas all I can remember from all this season is 1 goal against St Mirren. Other than that, what's he done? So Terminado, it's not going to happen for him long term, and if Adam Idah stays, brilliant. If he doesn't, always no going to be your second choice.
I think the goal against St Mirren, so it was a winner against St Mirren in a 2-1 victory. And that was, to be honest, that was right after that game against Hibs, which was terrible. One of the worst games of the season, the 0-0 draw. So if Celtic had drawn again, the morale of the fans would have been absolutely through the floor at that point. So it is a very important goal for O to get.
It also got worse after that.
Yeah, that's right. That was a very important goal. And see, when you're talking about important moments, they tend to all be at the end of the season because of the way the season played out, because it got tighter and tighter as the season went on. So when we talk about big moments, we're mainly referring to Matt O'Reilly scoring with 4 or 5 games to go, scoring in every game, Adam Idah scoring late goals. But that's a big goal as well when you look back at it. If they didn't win that, then who knows?
Finish.
Yeah, who knows would have gone from that point. But that's it for him, really. I know this isn't how football works because goals change the momentum, change the flow of games, right? So you can't do this. But if you were to extract all of those goals apart from that one against St Mirren, the results stay much the same. They're all wins.
Celtic get the same amount of points, don't they?
Exactly. So again, that's not how it works. You can't extract goals away. But what I mean is, if you look at the scoreline, chop off those goals, we still get wins for the most part of his goals. So he's been all right. I know there's been a case made recently that he's actually a more effective player than people like to let on. But that seems to be based on stuff from under Ange. And I'll not argue with that. He was okay under Ange, scored a few goals. But Ange is gone and Brendan Rodgers doesn't want him. So that's kind of the end of that story for me. I think he's a very good example of what I was talking about earlier about how I've not got the patience in me anymore for any of this. There's a player in there stuff, because what we see there is an absolute glaring example of what you've got and what you can have.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, again, we can spend the next 5 seasons messing about with all these players who might have it in them, might not. They might get better. They might, they're 23, 24 years old. Or we can go out and get the players that you can afford and are actually proven quality. And I know people will say, but you'll need to spend a fortune for that. Good, do it.
Yes, and the point,
buy players that are ready.
And what
for
we're
this.
talking about here, Stephen, is Celtic's second choice striker, not even second choice, 1.5 choice striker.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we need 2 good strikers at the club, and that's why I don't really put up much of a defence for all. As far as this season's been, I'm agreeing with Melly. Terminado, not contributing anywhere near enough. James McCarthy. Well, I just marked Terminado down here. He was Terminado in January. No improvement, any increase in that. One of the weirdest signings I've ever heard.
Another year.
Another year. Wow. Next up, final 2.
I would consider improving James McCarthy's position, putting him up a tier if he was even photographed with anything to do with Celtic. Again, I would consider that.
Even a photograph of him in this year's training gear would do me.
You know how there's like a myth that goes around Celtic that, he's a Desmond signing. Desmond signed him, right? Without saying too much, that's not a myth.
No.
Right, okay.
I've had it confirmed to me recently that that's not a myth. And I suspect that this James McCarthy probably falls into that category. Anyway, so he's a 4th, bottom of the class, the most peculiar signing that we've ever had.
He could have his own tier, quite honestly.
Quite a strange signing. Lewis Palmer. I've used this phrase before about Palmer, Melly, but for me, he's not a quality product, and he's just a fraction above Kuhn. I could see, this might be blasphemous, but I can see why Rangers would pass up on him.
Yep.
And we laughed at the time.
Scoffed at that. Not because they went out and got better players than him necessarily, but if you've done your research on Palmer, you're probably not signing him. To me, he was it's this or nothing type signing for Celtic. His overall contribution throughout the season hasn't been Terminado, but it's been the bare minimum for a Celtic player for me. Spends far too much time online, spends far too much time celebrating goals before he's realised whether they're VAR'd off or on. 3, that's it. What was that? Bitterly disappointing.
Yeah, dropping down, and it was a kind of promising start because you thought, this guy, we've got Yang, we've got Kuhn, who are flattering to deceive, aren't they? They're maybe doing things. You think, Palmer was the opposite. He wasn't doing anything, but he was scoring or assisting, and you thought, right, maybe if he can kick on, but he simply didn't. If anything, he got worse. And again, it's like Stephen said, for a lot of these players, have no time for it anymore.
Yeah.
The guy isn't going to be a Celtic player, and I mean that by a guy like the guys in the top tier or the second tier that you can go hang a hat on and go, if they're playing, it's fine. If Lewis Palmer's playing, there's so many deficiencies in his game that Brendan Rodgers just thought towards the end of the season, I can't rely on this guy. Yeah. I just can't do it.
I would look to move him on in January, in summer if we could. Oh no, in all honesty, he's another one for me, Stephen, that falls into the camp. If he was on loan, not one person would want to keep him.
No, you're right. I think he's been all right though. I don't want to suggest that he's been absolutely terrible, because there were moments. I think he'd scored in the Champions League as well, a couple of goals in fact. He did okay back then. And looking back on the season, it's bitterly disappointing because I think he fell away quite massively. And again, that's something we have to apply here. who fell out of the team when it mattered.
Yeah.
Who was ejected from the team when it turned out we couldn't rely on them. That's a massive thing. That's a huge factor in how we assess these players. James Forrest had to come in and bail these guys out. He did. So whether that was the reason that James Forrest got his chance or not doesn't really matter. He took it. Lewis Palmer didn't.
At the end of the day, he's had more goal celebrations than he's had goals.
Yeah, he has, definitely, because he got a couple chopped off. But he's another one where I'm looking at it and thinking, right, do we spend time and resources and effort trying to make him faster and get him better decision making, a better athlete, or do we go out and sign a guy like that?
He's 24 as well.
Yeah, exactly. So looking back across the season, he's a bit disappointing. If we were talking about going into next season, he's a terminado for me, probably, because I want better than that. But I think he, having scored a few goals, having assisted a few goals, a couple of lovely crosses in there. There was one for Reo at home that I remember in particular. I don't think he's terminado based entirely on his performance this season. I think he's bitterly disappointing, but I would not be that bothered if we lost him altogether.
Like Brendan Rodgers says, if it's in you, I'll find it. Because if it's not in you, then he's not to blame. I think we've seen a lot of that this season with some of these players, particularly Palmer. Right,
So what did you go? Terminado or bitterly disappointed?
Bitterly disappointed.
So he's third tier, bitterly disappointing. Right, the final player of the day. Can we guess who it is? Who's missing? Stephen, do you know?
My favourite.
Oh, yes, it's Liam Scales, isn't it?
Yes, Mr. Liam Scales, who, unbelievably, do you know what he was in January?
Oh, he was top tier.
Astonishingly brilliant in January. We all had a drink. Hogmanay was just around the corner. We were still tucking into Christmas booze. We got a wee bit excitable. But for me, he's a right good teammate. He's been good for Celtic, for Liam Scales, but we don't apply that anymore. We don't do that anymore around these parts. We look at Liam Scales' contribution as in the history of the pantheon of Celtic centre halves and all that sort of stuff. But look, I don't want to come across needlessly being a dick here, right? But
it's the last thing you are.
It's the last thing I am. But the fact is, Liam Scales he's done okay. See, for me, he never puts a foot wrong, right? Go watch the cup final. He put about 1 million feet wrong. He's terrifying to watch sometimes, right? And I know he puts his head where other men don't dare put their feet and all this sorts of stuff, and for that we are thankful. But he came in, he did the job. Yep. He's definitely one to be improving on next season. And for me, we were all a bit, as I said, for me, second tier.
Yeah, second tier. I think he has to be, because whenever he's been available, he has played for Celtic, and it wasn't a case of Celtic simply had him or nobody. They had lots of options towards the end of the season. Celtic didn't have any injuries, apart from McCarthy. So they had Nawrocki, they had Welsh on the bench, Lagerbielke was training. So look, he is comfortably the second best centre-back at Celtic. Does that mean he's a good player? No, but for this season, he's been a right good teammate, and at that point, he was astonishingly brilliant for him. And at that point, but we've seen with a full season of him, you will get the odd people that just absolutely quadruple down on it. But I think for most fans, they'll go, right, that for that season, thank you, but Celtic we can't go forward with this, because if we want to be the club we can be, another one that if Celtic line up in the 1st of September for a game and Liam Scales is still your centre-half, we have got major problems. Major problems. So, right good teammate for this season, but another one that we're better than this, Celtic. We are better than this. And I think when we come to the end of this, coming to the last player, we usually only put 2 or 3 in the top tier. But for this season, we needed 3, 4, 5 to perform in that top tier to get Celtic over the line, because we have so many in the bottom 2 tiers. And there's not been a lot in that second tier. So I think that disparity in the whole squad shows. And the fact that Liam Scales is in the second bracket shows that Celtic need to go out and sort this now.
Stephen, any arguments?
No. So the second tier, that's Greg Taylor, that's Alistair Johnston, that's a few others. Is he in there with that lot? I think the answer is absolutely yes. Considering he played virtually the entire season, he kept other players out of the team, as you've described, Melly.
I mean, here's your top tier. This is who you're including them with: McGregor, Carter Vickers, Idah and Joe Hart.
Yeah. Right, so no, right, is the answer to that. He's not in there with that, but I do appreciate that he played pretty much the entire season, just exactly as the case I made for Greg Taylor. He's the guy getting put out there to face the groans from the crowd and all that every single week, and he's performing. But I do agree, broadly speaking, with the idea that we have to improve, we have to get better in that position. But for that season there, he's an easy, right good teammate for me. Absolutely easy for that. It'd be insane of us to put him any lower than that. And does he belong over the course of a season, over the course of a league win? Does he belong in there with Alistair Johnston and Greg Taylor and a number of others who've made it in there? James Forrest? Yeah, the answer is yes to that.
And the only reason Greg Taylor's not at the top is because he can't take a throw in.
Yeah.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal. Don't understand it. Easier than kicking the ball. Listen. That is us wrapping up the top tier list for the season, the end of season report card. We have right good team. No, we have astonishingly brilliant. We have right good teammate. We have bitterly disappointing. And we have Terminado. That is how everyone has shaped up for this season.
And now we submit that to Celtic and they get working on this Terminado list as well, get them shipped out.
Even though it doesn't really mean Terminado. And we completely... Remember the last time we did this, Melly just kept buying into the own gimmick, his own gimmick. He's like, he's a right good teammate, but Melly, that's not the point. Anyway, breaking kayfabe there. Thank you so much for your continued support on Patreon. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you so much to everyone who's been watching us throughout the season. We'll be back very soon.